All right, you happily miserable accursed, it's time for the Curse of Politics. I'm your skip, David Schneider Herle, here with the starting lineup for the best political panel in the country. Playing left field and leading off, Jordan Collective Bargaining Leichnitz. Your right fielder, batting number 3, Kory Power Stroke Teneycke. You're finally playing in center field, batting cleanup, Scott, never not working hard to join the middle class, Reid. Big exciting news in baseball yesterday. You were there, Scott.
I was, but I have to begin by saying that this very forced effort to latch onto the Blue Jays clinching of American League East. I understand that Rosenberg loves baseball. I understand he is a literary wordsmith giant, but that felt
Well, between last week and this week, have you noticed we're trying harder? Ratings are slipping. People are drifting off. We've got to do more of this sort of, this sort of color in the intro.
Excellent. All right. We should bring the energy.
I mean, I think it should be rugby themed, no? If anything else.
There we go. But
there, you know what? Now you've got me. Now,
there you go.
No. Yeah, see now.
You can have a try, David. It's okay.
Yeah.
I think the game was exciting, but I will say this. A 12-year-old boy turns to me 3/4 of the way through the game, and the Jays have it by the throat. And he says, "Excuse me, mister?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you think the Blue Jays can win the World Series?" And everyone around us stopped, and everyone looks. And I'm like paralyzed by this kid. And I muff it. I'm like, well, it depends on their. And then like some other guy goes, yes, they can win the World Series. Of course we're going to win the World Series. And the guy gives me this look like, hey, shit for brains. If a 12-year-old kid asks you if his favorite team, who he's watching clinch the American League East, is going to make it all the way to the World Series, you don't hesitate and think about the team's deficiencies.
I'm like, you're not new at this, Scott, you know?
But Jordan is actually right about the big news. I mean, yes, sure, those of us in Toronto can get excited about the Blue Jays, but overall, 81,000 people watched women play rugby this weekend. That's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah. Too bad we lost.
But
yeah,
love to see the energy.
How do you get back? When is the next one?
I don't know.
I didn't know that women played rugby, so the whole thing was news to me, but I'm not the sports guy on this panel, so...
Well, we're just here to educate you, Kory.
Well,
broadening your horizons.
I'm glad they did well-ish. There you go.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to leave all the jokes where they are right now. And just move on. Here's the rundown today. We're going to talk about Public Safety Minister Gary, say it, Scott.
And that, now you screwed me up. Andisre.
All right.
However, a Sri Lankan friend, a Tamil buddy of mine, told me that is not actually right. That is the anglicized version. That it should really be pronounced Andisre.
Well, that was impressive. All right. Anyway, he fucked up. And on the gun buyback program. So we're going to talk about that.
Don't put a thumb on the scale.
He left
fuck up about
How do you feel he did?
Back.
Maybe you should lead us off.
Well, you don't think it was good, do you?
No.
You'll recall that Tim and I have some experience with surreptitiously recorded conversations, and so
yeah, exactly. Warm, comfy rug.
The PTSD there.
Yeah. Our curse clipping is a little different this week. We normally pick out something that's been written by a journalist and published somewhere, but that's only one of the ways in which communications happens these days. And so we've picked out a video that Andrew Scheer was tweeting out this past week, criticizing Prime Minister Carney on his bad week, including ostriches. So we'll talk about that. And then Canada Post. On strike. Is Postal Service still a political issue in this country? It used to be years ago. Big political issue. I presume it is still in some parts of the country, but we'll get into that. And then finally, the presence of Mr. Pinsent will call for our hey yous. So let's start with the Public Safety Minister. Jordan, let's start with you. So I never really seen anything quite like this before, because I I have never seen a clip of the responsible minister the day before they announce a piece of legislation on tape telling somebody that the legislation is bad, won't work, and is conceptually flawed. And that they would have done it differently if they'd had their choice. I don't really understand, Jordan, how either the legislation wasn't withdrawn or the minister didn't resign.
Yeah, the whole thing is pretty remarkable, although I think what was more remarkable to me is what happened in that private conversation with somebody the minister knew to be opposed. And I mean, look, I think we have to name, like, this is also like really, this was like good oppo that was released by the gun lobby and at a really good timing in terms of making an impact. But the core of the problem is that what Andisre said is it goes to, I think what, as a New Democrat, I can say is a very long tradition within the Liberal Party, which is the politics around these gun issues. And he talks about a cynical political reason for the government putting forward the buyback other than public safety, which is votes in Quebec. And of course, that is a significant issue in Quebec. Of course, there is political machinations underneath all this stuff. It's just like you usually don't say that out loud to a hostile constituent. Like that's really poor judgment. And I'm pretty astounded that he's still the minister. I don't think that that's going to be a long-term situation for him. I was interested to see last week that he was sort of let to go out and sort of do his own cleanup on aisle 9 on this stuff, that he was out doing sort of the shows and trying to explain this. Not well, I don't think. I don't think he did a good job explaining it.
His defense was that it was a private conversation.
Yeah, that's insane.
But
that's
that just
insane.
makes it more likely to be honest.
Absolutely.
Right?
And because what he's expressing is not just that there is, for example, debate within the public safety community or even within the government about whether this is the right path. Like, he is really saying, like, I don't think this is going to work, but we're doing it anyways for political reasons. So it's sort of like the most damning of all possible arguments. I think he will not be minister in a pretty short order. And I think that the government, and Carney ended up with a pretty unappealing choice to make. Do you pull back on the buyback in view of this and lend credence to the things that he's saying? I don't think you can do that either. I think the hope is that this will burn itself out and he can quietly shuffle him out down the road. But like, this is amateur hour shit. Like, this is not something, and this is also, by the way, the second time this minister Andisre has gotten himself in trouble in recent weeks. So there's no way that he's staying.
Everybody who knows him seems to like him, by the way.
Well, by all accounts, he seems like a lovely person who is very honestly intentioned in a lot of what he does, and that's great. And I think, it's true. You saw in sort of previous portfolios when he was working in Indigenous affairs issues, he was well received in the community. He was doing a lot of good work. This also is a very tough file. Public safety eats ministers. Like, this is a very complex file. It is politically radioactive, particularly in the battle lines that have been drawn with the Conservatives. And you have to have a good amount of political competence to carry it off. And it seems pretty clear that he's not the fit for it.
So I'm picking up on a conceptual theme I talked about a couple of weeks ago, but now I'm going to make it very concrete, and wood, and steel, and LEED Gold certified to boot. The longtime presenting sponsor of this podcast, that would be Telus, cut a ribbon on something downright historic last Wednesday in Rimouski, Quebec. They opened Canada's first fully sovereign AI factory. Plenty of mucky mucks were there, including Evan Solomon, the minister responsible for artificial intelligence and digital innovation. This factory is the first in a series we're doing here about Telus AI, how it's going to help drive results for government, business, and the Prime Minister's vision for a stronger, more unified Canadian economy. So here's the computational skinny. The factory is powered by cutting-edge technology from industry leaders like NVIDIA and HPE. Access to this tech means that Canadian businesses can use Telus facilities to both build new AI models and deploy them in their business operations. All that while being LEED Gold certified, powered by over 99% renewable energy, and using 75% less water than any average AI plant. Sovereign means exactly what you think it does. For the first time, our Canadian businesses, banks, healthcare facilities, and other data-driven organizations won't have to rely on foreign-controlled systems to develop their AI solutions. This place is built, owned, and operated by Canadians, so our data stays safeguarded within our borders. At the same time, it allows us to welcome partners and AI adopters from all over the world here to leverage Canadian innovation. I'll drill down a bit more on the sovereignty piece, the security and pride of it all, next week.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I was calling for this guy's resignation weeks ago. Weeks ago, he was already bad. But I think you left out two of the more damning parts of the backstory here on this interaction. He offered to bail this guy out of jail if he was arrested for not giving his guns back to the government.
But isn't that just?
Yeah,
I know that you're really upset about that, Kory. But if you think it's a bad policy, isn't that just cricket? Like, isn't that the right thing to do?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's shocking. And moreover, he would pay personally the compensation gap between the shitty number the government gives you and the real number. Now this sounds like quite bad, like for a minister of the crown, especially someone in a sort of quasi-judicial role. Just no judgment. It's the kind of poor judgment that, would lead you to lobby on behalf of Tamil Tiger to get their citizenship, which he's also done, right? Like you've got to be a special kind of shitty to have people at public safety longing for the days of Bill Blair, who was just like old, slow, and looked like he was hungover all the time. I don't know. It's not great, really not great. And
okay, but Kory, let's get into the real world of politics. This guy is a great fucking organizer.
Yeah, well, no one can.
This guy is a great political organizer.
Well, you would know, David, because I think like of the how many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of memberships did you sell for Paul Martin, and what was the ratio of Tamils to the rest of the population in that number? I'm sure quite disproportionate.
Higher than Census Canada would find.
Higher than Census Canada. Yeah. Well, look, there is, sure there is a element of people signing up folks for leadership races, but I would say that is generally done in ethnic communities in a way that is not paying the greatest respect for the rules of the race, and that you will also get a disproportionate number of, if not fake instant members, full-on fake members. This is not like where you go to find the most honest brokers in political organizations is in the mass ethno sign-up realm. So to then say we're going to put that guy in charge of law enforcement also seems wrong-headed. Like the fact that you would have these kinds of problems. How would a guy in whose lineage is that deal with a problem like the firearms registry and the gun buyback? Hey, don't worry, buddy, I'll bail you out. Hey, don't worry, buddy, I'll write you a personal check. You'll get your money back. Don't worry. It's kind of like membership fees, isn't it? Like I think the fuck ups that this guy's making seem very on point given how he got there, which is selling memberships for leadership races. Maybe not the right place to put a guy like that, I would just venture to say.
Scott, you got a different point of view?
Well, I mean, I think we got to be careful. The guy can't be public safety minister because he's Tamil. I'm not down with
no
that,
one said that. Nobody said that. Writing a letter in support of a known Tamil Tiger, and that's not good if you're going to be in charge of counterterrorism. Gotta say,
a characterization, not necessarily a fact. But I think the interesting issue is, to me, like this is like it's gruesome, right? Like it's embarrassingly bad, right? This kind of, so we can all off the top of our heads say, well, why, like, even if you didn't know you were being taped, but like why didn't you say this? Why didn't you say that? Like if it's someone you've long known who you know is going to hate the program, why don't you just say, listen, Barb, Bob, whatever your name is, like Jesus Murphy, right? We're never going to agree. We got to agree to disagree. Have a great day, but I'm not going to spend 15 minutes on this doorstep talking to you and coming up with strange concoctions about like, wow, it's all for Quebec, or I'll pay for your guns, or just keep your guns. It's not like the fucking cops can actually make it here anyway. They got cars to not, relocate. So, stolen cars. So I don't, but here's the thing to me. I kind of think the question is, what's the political fallout? Not that huge. I mean, I'm more concerned, to be honest with you, with how the government does not look like it's getting its hands around the crime file. Right. And this, to me, like when we go like big picture, what's like, nobody knows who the public safety minister is. No one really cares that much. And to me, it is sometimes public security is about international terrorism. Sometimes it's about crime. Right now, it's got to be about crime. And I didn't like the fact that they led to the buyback program rather than bail reform. I didn't like that they have found it, obviously difficult to come to grips with what they want to say on this that might blunt the rising concern in the GTA, in Vancouver, broadly across the country, and the criticism that, in my view, is landing and has landed since the election campaign from the Conservatives on this file, right? Like, I really think it affected the last 10 days of the election campaign in terms of seat count in the GTA, as an example. Yeah. And they still don't have that rhythm together. So that, to me, is the big picture concern. I look at it and I think Carney, I can understand a couple reasons why he didn't pull the plug on him, to your question, David, right? One is, I'm 100% in agreement with Jordan. Like, how do you pull the plug on the guy without actually reconstituting the program, right? Like, so it's like, well, you know what? You shit the bed. You go out there and you tell people that the program is right. Since you're the one who said it was wrong, you're going to have to face that down. But I'm not going to pull you, dump you, and then what? Say that it's nevertheless the right program, make some tweaks to the program. So that's that. That's the first thing. The second thing I'm suspecting is the fact that everyone likes him. They feel bad. And I think, there's obviously the organizational aspect. There's the, contribution that he makes internally within the party apparatus. So you put all those things together, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The book is you then dump this guy 4 months, 6 months, 8 months down the road. But I'll be curious. The question to me is, can he survive in some way? And to me, the answer depends on, and the reason I wonder if maybe they are thinking that too. Why did they put him out to do the interviews? Like, why didn't they Bigfoot him and put somebody else out? Like, it felt to me like they were saying, listen, you got to swim your way back to shore. Okay. Show us, like, you shit the bed. Show us that you can clean up. And so then the question is, well, what's he going to do? And I think the obvious thing for him to do, first of all, he's got to become a stronger performer. He's not strong enough on camera. Second of all, he's got to reorient his agenda around crime. Like, just like this.
But this is where all of you, that this panel really suffers from not having a Quebec perspective, because this really is a Quebec issue. This really is being driven by Quebec politics. And there really is, I think, now a divide. There was, I think, back in the 90s, enough commonality between enough English Canadians and enough Quebecers on gun policy that you could have gun policy that really only conservative people opposed. But now I'm not sure that you can have a gun policy that Quebecers want and that English Canadians think makes any sense. I think this guy's problem may have been, in English Canada, there's really no way to defend this program.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that's probably not a fair characterization of the history, the politics of gun policy in Canada. These programs, like be it the registry or any of these other things, have long been alienating in large parts of English Canada in rural areas.
But had followers in English Canada as well.
Sure, in some urban
not everybody
areas.
Not everybody in English Canada hated the gun registry.
Not everybody in Quebec hates firearms, though. Like, if you look at per capita rates of hunting, they're highest in Quebec, David. They're highest in Quebec. There is a huge appetite for folks to do, hunting and fishing and all of those kinds of things that, include firearm ownership in Quebec. It's one of the only places in the country where you can go into, not a non-specialty restaurant and actually get game meat on the menu. Like there is a appetite for it. Depends where you are. It's just not in Montreal. I actually don't think it's that different than it is elsewhere. But if you go up to the Beauce, like where Max Bernier country, or like the 11, 12 seats where the Conservatives can actually win, folks like in the Quebec City area, I don't think it pulls out differently than Saskatchewan or Alberta do on firearms issues. It's just Montreal is such a dominant place in the same way the GTA is. I think there's a male-female divide on firearms issues. I think there's a rural-urban divide. I don't think it's particularly pronounced on Quebec, rest of the country. Although, I will defer to you as you are the pollster, but I certainly know lots of people who are very eager firearms owners, and I know lots of people who come every hunting season to the beautiful province of Saskatchewan to find some large white-tailed deer to hunt.
So down in Clinton, Ontario, an hour north of London, there's a place called Sloman Park, and in it sits a single rail car. It's a strange little rail car, unlike anything in the CN fleet to which it once belonged. When you step inside this meticulously restored bit of railway history, which you can easily do because it's open to the public for visits, you'd swear you just stepped into a school classroom, which is exactly what you'd be doing. It was a classroom, a rolling classroom. For more than 40 years, from 1926 to 1967, it and 6 other rail cars like it ranged around northern Ontario, educating students in remote mining towns. The rail cars delivered basic education in 5-day sessions once a month. They brought medicine and supplies. They even dispensed civics lessons to first-generation immigrants working in the deeps. The teachers in the school cars, as they were known, lived on the trains with their families, itinerant educators. One of the most dedicated was Fred Sloman, the teacher on school car number 1. Sloman was a pedagogical nomad for most of his life, traveling between Sudbury, Capreol, and Folliot. He and his wife Selah raised 5 children aboard the trains. There's a picture in the Ontario archives that captures the harshness and the hope of the time. A group of kids trooping out of a solitary, icicle-encrusted school car, wading through deep snow, clutching their book bags. When the school cars moved on to the next towns, Sloman and his fellow teachers would leave students with 3 weeks of homework to complete before the school car returned. It's a completely Canadian story, and it happened on the rail lines of our sponsor, CN. Fred Sloman was an ordinary Canadian hero, and now he has a public park in Clinton named after him, with his school car parked in it. He deserves to be remembered.
But look, the point is, and the Conservatives also recognize there's a divide on this. You can think back to 2021 when O'Toole stepped in it in the French debate by waffling his position on the assault rifle ban, right? There was a reason that he did that, because they viewed that as having a constituency in Quebec. And I think that the ultimate problem here is not so much the polarization around gun policy. That has been fed and exploited by liberals and conservatives for many decades now. That's a known political dynamic. I think the problem is much more in the vein of what Scott was saying for the government, is that on these files, and not so much on the gun piece, because that has kind of known impacts and known rural-urban divides, known Quebec rest of Canada divides that they're hitting that button and tapping into. But it's the inability to get their arms around the broader crime issue. And the challenge with the public safety file in particular is that it is such a massive portfolio. So this is everything from border control to corrections to gun policy. All of that stuff is encompassed in the public safety file. There are so many places where it can go sideways. You can just ask Marco Mendicino on this one, right? And the challenge that I see for the minister as he goes ahead is that sometimes explaining this stuff and sometimes trying to get to the bottom of a political resolution of it, you end up in a worse situation. I think that's certainly what happened in Mendicino's case on the Bernardo transfer. They dug deeper and there was more to find there. Who knows what else is out there, right, on this file with Minister Andisre? We don't know. Are there other conversations? Are there going to be other examples where his judgment has been lacking that are gonna come up? I'm I see it as a pretty difficult task for him to pull himself out of this tailspin.
Yeah,
but I'm ultimately of the view that what he said to his neighbor is what Michael Kinsley, the former long time ago journalist in the States, defined as a political gaffe, which is when a politician inadvertently says the truth. And to me, this is a fucking, this is a dumb policy. Scott, the problem you're having is that the nexus between this policy and people's concerns about crime couldn't be further apart.
That's exactly my concern. And I think that's the political challenge for the government. I don't think it's about whether this minister screws up again or not. If he doesn't, maybe he finds a way to survive in another portfolio where, he's less in front of the camera or something like that. If he does, then he gets dumped. Like that's not going to dictate how the government performs the next election. This is an issue that affected the last election in April and could affect the next one. And so Kory, by the way, you said two things earlier, David. You said we got to be mindful of the fact that in Quebec, gun control plays differently. Kory split one hair with you, which was about Quebec and its views. I'll split the other hair in that statement, which is gun control. I'm not even sure that this is actually gun control. Like if you go for an assault rifle ban and you start playing like, we're going to do a handgun ban, those things get people all wound up and talking and all that stuff. But that feels like gun control to people. And you can find cleavages and you can find segments of the population that are with you, against you, all that kind of stuff. The buyback program is to me the weakest deer in this herd, because it's so like, I get how much money back and the cops don't have enough money to actually execute the program and all. So again, like I've been pulling my hair out for 2 weeks going, if the problem is crime, how is the buyback program the answer? It's not the sharp edge of the crime issue. It's not even, if you're going to move into the gun control side of the argument, a particularly effective example of that. It is literally a bureaucratic, unwieldy program, which is the minister says, fuck, I don't know, like whatever, like keep your guns, give your guns back, like whatever. What's the difference? So if they got to get a hold of this crime issue, not as a proactive issue, as a defensive issue. They have to neutralize it, or it's going to chew on them.
It's a cheap culture wars issue, I think, is kind of where the genesis of it is more than anything. Do you not think, guys? Like it's we're not like the Americans, right? Is that not really the subtext of it? Like what's happened this past few days in the United States?
There's a lot of that in how it works in Toronto. I'm just disagreeing with you people about Montreal. I think Montreal's really different on this.
Well, it's so long ago that like people who are going to universities now were not alive when like the École Polytechnique was. In fact, probably some of their
December 6th
and don't forget, like the cabinet table looks different, right? Like you've got Natalie Provost and caucus, like you've got like that conversation is going to be really different right now.
So I'm just saying, like, yes, there's a long shadow from 2000 September 11th, 2001. It's not the same, if you were not even born yet when that happened, like how you live these things viscerally. There are so many mass shootings in the States. Like I think there have been like 3 in 3 days. Like there's the tragic thing with the church in Michigan. There's the guy who floated by a restaurant in North Carolina and shot the place up. Like there's so many, you can't even keep track of them all in the United States. But that is a United States phenomenon. There's a lot of firearms ownership in Canada. In fact, rates that are not that dissimilar to the United States in large parts of this country. And yet we don't have mass shootings all the time. And there are cultural elements to all of this. And I think that people play games with this stuff for very crassly political reasons. And what's the great crime that the minister had? He pointed out that this is crass politics that is ineffective and doesn't make a lot of sense if you're looking at the issue, but that's what it is. It's crass politics. And we can argue whether it's about Quebec politics. I can argue that's like anti-American politics. We can argue that it's rural-urban politics, but we can all agree on one thing. It's fucking politics. It's not policy. Bad guys don't use registered firearms. It's, or if they do, they probably should just check them into prison right from the get-go because you're too stupid to be a criminal.
Domestic violence is what the bureaucrats used to talk about. So let's move on to our next, to our cursed clipping, which is a video I think it's about 5 minutes long.
Well, Parliament's back, and Mark Carney had a terrible week. He promised Canadians that he was the man with the plan, would move at unimaginable speeds. Well, anyone who believed him must be severely disappointed. Let's take a quick look at just some of the ways that Mark Carney let you down this week.
4 minutes and 51 seconds. I watched it again this morning.
Yeah. Andrew Scheer.
Thank God for the Ostriches, because I was really sagging in my seat, but then the Ostriches
Picks up
came
in the
up
middle.
and it gave me a new zip of energy.
Well, I'm going to start with you, Scott. And, I really want to listen to the three of you because I think I'm well on the record about my views on Andrew Scheer. And the only thing I'll say is that the glasses do make you look like an owl, but they don't make you look wiser. So, Scott, take us off with, what do you think about this as a means of communication? Because that's all, this is, they're pretty good at online social media comms. So this is obviously a deliberate, thought through attempt at reaching a large number of people with a report on the week. What do you think of it as a comms tactic?
I think the glasses make him look like a middle-aged, grown-up, tired, and defeated Harry Potter. And people look at that and go, there is no way that guy took out Death Eaters and Voldemort. Just didn't happen. So get lenses. I think there's a couple of interesting things about this, actually, in all honesty. I think the most obvious takeaway, which I'm guessing pretty much everybody will agree with, maybe I'm wrong, is that this is a demonstration of what appears to be the macro strategy of the Conservatives, which is fundamentally cultivate and maintain our vote. So let's keep that 40% that we got, keep it activated, engage it, keep it really fed, and then hope to just play percentages on the government won't be able to play perfect baseball through such an unbelievably difficult geopolitical and economic time. And so we'll be there to pick up the pieces. But job number one is keep your 40% coalition, feed those guys all the time. And therefore, this is not persuasion communications. This is reinforcement communications, which we've seen time and time again from the Conservatives. And I'm not even criticizing that in this sense, in that that would be part of an integrated strategy. I don't see where they are looking to pick up 5%. I'm not sure, by the way, they're at 40. I think this is more part of probably a 28% sort of universe. And so I do think they have to at some point think about that, but I can get why they think this is important to do. It's not like they're spending millions of dollars. I think the second aspect of it as part of that is they've decided that, yes, we do need an attack dog above and beyond our leader. It won't just be Pierre. So they're listening maybe to places like this that have been saying that. Perhaps they're reaching the same conclusion. I don't think the Scheer would be the person I would pick. I would pick the most talented, attractive, and interesting person who can talk and talk quick and hard. I wouldn't go by the basis of seniority and business card in the caucus in order to pick the attack dog. I don't think he's a good attack dog. I don't think he works on camera very well, but that's what they've chosen to do. So I think that decision is interesting. It will be interesting to me if they audition others in similar kinds of content like this. Will we see a 5-minute video from a couple of other members, and there'll be evidence that they're sort of, going through and sort of seeing who tracks and who resonates best and with what kind of audiences. And then, I think the final thing that I would say about it is the reason I know that I'm correct is that it talks about ostriches. So if there was any attempt to reach out to a broader audience and to reinforce your standing and persuade people that are not inherently with you, if you were thinking, I want to take the 5 to 10% who decided that they would rethink their rejection of the Liberal Party because they were tired of Trudeau and give Carney a chance because they liked maybe what he represented in terms of the maturity of dealing with the trade issue and all that kind of stuff. They're not talking to those people if they're talking about ostriches. They're really talking to BC Conservatives. They're talking to movement Conservatives outside of BC because no one else has latched onto this issue. And so that just makes me think I'm all the more right. I'm actually not as critical as you might think I am of it, David, because I think there's a place for this.
I wasn't expecting you to be critical.
No, I think there's a place for this. And I think it's interesting that they've made a tactical decision to not just ask Poilievre to personally carry it all. I'm not sure I like the person they've turned to, but I think it's more interesting than the content is to me as a matter of political strategy.
Last week in this space, I talked about the 2024 early emissions report from our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute. There were two headlines. Progress on national emissions has completely stalled, and Canada's reduction target for 2030 is now out of reach. All of this after a country on fire all summer with our second worst wildfire season on record. So the question is, what now? Can we still affect policy change to improve the situation? The answer is more than yes, we can. It's yes, we'd better. And modernizing our industrial carbon pricing systems is the single biggest policy lever we have, because it has the ability to reduce the most emissions. There's actually a mix of systems in our provinces and territories, but they can all deliver big emissions cuts at very low cost to industry. And some companies can even profit. In fact, that's exactly the point. In each system, top performing firms that reduce emissions generate credits to sell. Lower performing firms have an incentive to reduce emissions to avoid paying for them if they exceed a specified limit. In Canada's oil and gas sector, that would work out to about roughly 30 cents per barrel, or less than the price of a Timbit. Incredibly low cost. Industrial carbon pricing also helps protect Canadian firms from paying carbon tariffs imposed by some regions on countries without carbon pricing, precisely what the European Union and the UK are set to do. As I said off the top, the system needs modernizing, a few technical fixes, which could double the emissions impact. One of those fixes? Making sure carbon markets are working properly and that carbon credits are valuable. But Alberta just announced changes that would weaken its carbon market and the incentives to invest in emissions-cutting action. And Saskatchewan ended theirs entirely. The Climate Institute's data suggests the time for policy improvements is now. Building one stronger Canadian economy depends on it. Competitiveness in a world transitioning to clean energy depends on it. Nation building depends on it. More next week. Kory, I'd like to hear from you next. And while you're talking, can you talk a little bit about this, which is 5 minutes? Like, it's an interesting choice. Like you know a lot about how this media works these days, more than me. So, I mean, who watches 5 minutes of Andrew Scheer talking about federal politics?
Somebody is looking to jerk off to it, basically, in a political sense. Like,
sorry, I need to interrupt again. I just mentioned that I watched all 5 minutes twice, and I would like to dissociate myself from the category of person.
But as in a professorial
I mean, you did
way,
say you
case,
enjoyed it.
But look, I mean, there's many aspects to enjoyment.
Jordan,
it did not involve.
I don't need to know what you're into, Scott. I don't need to know what you're into.
Carnal sense.
Yeah. It's but look, it's people who have like a pre-existing desire to see that kind of content. Like, it's going deeper than any casual viewer is going to watch, right? Like, if unless you're really into politics and you're really into the message that's being peddled, which is a pretty hardcore version of what the conservative narrative is, you're not getting past 90 seconds of that. If you're getting, if you're even getting to 30 seconds of it, like it's for hardcore viewers only, really, is what I would say. And so what are you getting? You're getting a hardcore presentation from the most hardcore guy. He's got the little gimp mask on and a little riding crop, and he's just spanking the Carney government as hard as he can.
I think you see something in this video that I missed.
Not for everyone. It's not for everyone, folks. If you haven't seen it, maybe you don't want to go watch. I'm just going to throw that out there. But look, I think you hit the nail on the head, Scott, in terms of what it is. Like, this is a way to jazz up your hardcore supporters. There's nothing persuasive about it to anyone who is not a hardcore supporter. It's too hyperbolic. The spokesperson is the least likable guy in their caucus in many respects. If you wanted to be persuasive, you'd have a Michelle Rempel or a Lanceman, and it wouldn't be as full of gaslighting bullshit like what was presented around C5. Like, it's the end of all democracy leave out that, well, we voted for the end of all democracy, apparently.
Mm.
So, it's just the volume is cranked up to 12. 12 volume is not persuasive. 12 volume is offensive to everyone except hyper fans of whatever music you're playing, right? You got to have it at a more reasonable volume level, and you got to have a more reasonable presentation. I think if you want to be persuasive to the non-hardcores, but this is not for the non-hardcores. This is for the guys who are gonna jump up and down with their fist in the air. And insofar as that's what it's marketing to, he does a good job marketing to that. And like, I don't think it's for anyone else. Like, why would you put it out on X if you're looking for a general audience? Like, there's no general audience on X. Like, that's where the insane asylum lives.
Agree.
Jordan, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would maybe pick up on a couple things that Kory was talking about there. And I think that it's interesting, like the choice of Scheer as a messenger and as an attack dog, to me, his very blandness and unpopularity is kind of the point, right? So this is a party that's still figuring out who else they want to put in the window besides Poilievre, and they are again choosing somebody who's pretty universally disliked. And who's not a threat to the leader. So they're choosing to put Scheer out, I think, in part precisely because he's a known commodity. He's a bit bland, and he's not going to outshine Poilievre leading into the January convention. I think that that's a big part of it. For sure, people like Rempel and Landsman would be far more competent as communicators. And a lot more interesting in terms of galvanizing people in a persuasion messaging. And I think this type of video, I would draw a distinction here between, for example, the type of vertical video that we've seen from, like US Democratic campaigns and places like that. Like, this is really, like, this is for the base. This is for people who are already in that orbit, who, and the Ostriches is the tip-off. This is a very niche issue that's active within that kind of, I don't even know if it's like a subsection of movement conservatives, right? So this is within the sphere of the anti-vaccine crowd. This is like all touching on those points. So this isn't something that is designed, for example, to reach a broad base of younger voters. This is like very niche to that particular audience. And the second thing to me that was most interesting about it is that when they're going out and doing something exactly like this, where they're niching themselves in with a more extreme portion of their base, that we can see from their strategy, they understand a need to keep those folks in the vote coalition. But then again, this is the same crap that gives them a ceiling, right? So this is that tension that they're always playing in. How do we keep that fight with the People's Party? We keep enough of that vote, but not kind of give ourselves a hard ceiling because we seem insane. So this is where they're playing. But I think that the risk in this for them is not that it's unpersuasive or not that it's niche, but that it also just really takes them off what has been their most effective core message with a more mainstream population, which is affordability issues, which is cost of living stuff, which is all of the things that Poilievre has been able to build some credibility on with normies. And every time they're out talking about this kooky shit, they're missing an opportunity to drive home a message that is what they are focused on, while Carney is out doing foreign trips and he's out at the UN and he's doing all of these other things. Like, the message that they're driving home is that we're obsessed with weird niche issues. So I see what they're doing. I understand it as an extension of the lessons that they refused to learn from the last campaign. But I think ultimately it's pretty harmful for them in two ways, because they're sidelining some of their more effective communicators and because they're detracting from their most effective issues.
One last thing I want to hear about this from the three of you, which is, take your point about how this is directed at the base, but it has an element to it that I find in all of their comms. And it's an element that I find unstrategic and born of hurt and anger. And that is that they don't just want people who voted for Carney to switch to vote for them. They want them to admit they were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that it's almost said explicitly at the front end of that video, where it's like, choking back the tears, how Carney has disappointed you, with your vote. And but that's not like, it's, so clearly what you're saying. Look, just to build on part of what Jordan was talking about, I do think there is another element that's maybe not so strategic but I think a trap that you see a lot of campaigns and a lot of people getting trapped in, and that is looking at your metrics of digital products, like how many likes did I get, right? How many shares, and being almost solely driven by that, and that is a reflection of not the mass appeal of these things, of the narrowness of them. Narrow moves in that sort of viral way, in a way that mainstream doesn't, and in the way that Persuasive doesn't. But people get trapped into believing that the thing that got the shares and the likes is actually the message that you want to be on. And that becomes a replacement for polling and focus testing. In fact, I've heard it explicitly from people in the federal Conservative Party that, well, we don't need to do that kind of stuff because we're looking at our online metrics. Like, online metrics are the worst fucking thing to look at. Like, this is like, bots in the insane asylum. It's not in any way reflective of what the voting public looks like. The voting public is not as online as the people who are doing this. Like, but if you want to see what my sons and their friends are thinking about something, by all means, look at those online metrics. If you want to look at what the voting public is going to look like, well, you better be looking at some other things too. And I think it explains, in part, why they got so fucked up in the last campaign, the Conservatives, is because they were so steeped in this digital metric world that they forgot that it is not like the entire voting public. It's not even half of the voting public, and it's just an over reliance on that feedback loop. And I think this is the potential trap in this stuff that they should be watching out for.
Hurly-burlyites, you've heard me say this before. Payments are part of Canada's national infrastructure. And now there's news about how that infrastructure is opening up. Canada's Retail Payment Activities Act, or RPAA, is now in effect. This law brings fintechs and other non-bank payment companies under new regulatory supervision. It's a big step for reliability and security, but also for access and innovation. Our sponsor, Interact, just announced that under the RPAA, qualifying payment service providers can apply to join the Interact e-transfer network. That's the service people like you and me use millions of times a day to send money, pay bills, and move funds. So what does it mean? It means a level playing field where every registered provider has to meet the same high bar for managing risk and protecting Canadians. It means the potential for more innovation, and it means more accessibility and choice for Canadians in how they move their money via a trusted Canadian network. So the next time you fire off an Interact e-transfer, don't just stop and admire how easy that was. Take a moment to remember Interact's network is the backbone of digital payments in Canada, and that backbone just got stronger. All right, Kory, let me stick with you. The Feds and Canada Post, Canada Post and its employees are at a logjam. The Feds intervened and instituted a policy that, I'm out of my depth here, but sounds like it was either identical to or very similar to a policy that the Harper government had put in place back when it was in office, and that the Trudeau Liberals had run against and abandoned, which is the ending of home delivery in a wide number of places. Now, I'm old, so I remember when Canada Post really fucking mattered. I remember when the head of their union was a guy named Jean-Jacques Perreault, and he was in the 70s and 80s, and when Canada Post went on strike, they would shut down the country.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, when Canada Post goes on strike, probably lots of people don't even notice.
Yeah.
And so it used to be a postal strike used to be a political disaster. Is a postal strike a political disaster?
Absolutely not. Like, the conversation we should be having is about the complete shutdown of Canada Post. Like, it's the yardsticks have moved a long way on this, there are better alternatives to Canada Post for everything that Canada Post does. It's losing 10 million bucks a day. And the only thing that's going to happen is that number is going to move to 20 million bucks a day. Like, there is no future for Canada Post in the long term. And how we get there is, a point for discussion, but it is, the world is changed. Like, email, digital bills, apps, like all the things that used to make Canada Post essential are not essential. And in terms of delivery of items that you're buying online, etc., they are so inefficient and so fucked up and so expensive compared to the alternatives that they basically have lost that business now too. And so it's very, very niche places in the country where anyone could describe them as an essential service. So, if there's a continued existence, it's how do you fill in the gaps of what the rest of is happening in the delivery of stuff economy, and focus on that. Focus on filling in the places where the market is not. But the idea that you're going to have mass delivery to places that are better served by other services makes no sense. It's threatening the existence of the entire entity, and there needs to be some rationalization. Most of this country, you could have a postal strike from now till the end of time, and people wouldn't fucking notice.
Jordan, you made a little bit of a face while he was doing that.
Yeah, I hate it. No, I mean, listen, I think part of the challenge here is that it's, do you conceive of Canada Post as a business, as it's been sort of made to operate, or is it a form of a public service, right? Is it a public good that you can affordably deliver mail to every part of the country? And I would argue that it's probably not a good move, particularly when we're in a tariff war with the US and a lot of small businesses in Canada are suffering and could benefit from affordable shipping, for example, to hollow out the only place that the government has a stake in making sure that those services are available to people across the country. I think that we're obviously, with the Carney government, we're in the ripping the Band-Aid off stage, where we're gonna front end load a lot of the
Jean-Claude Perrault, not Jean-Jacques Perrault. I just want to get my French right. Jean-Claude Perrault. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
And look, this is going to be unpopular in some quarters, not all across the country, not in every neighborhood, but it's going to be unpopular, particularly among some important Liberal voters. So there is, I think, going to be a political price to be paid, maybe not so much around the strike itself, but around the end of door-to-door delivery. It's also another example, pretty recent on the previous example of the flight attendants, of Carney weighing in favor of an employer in an ongoing labor dispute. So that's also not great for him. But I think the biggest problem with this is that it's a bit to what some of the things that Kory was talking about. Like, this is something that is effectively a public service. And this whole plan is really just like the enshittification of that public service. So, okay, so people aren't using Canada Post enough to deliver parcels, even though we're getting more parcels than we ever have before because of online ordering. So let's make it more expensive, slower, and let's also fire thousands of people while we're doing it. Like, I don't know that makes a lot of sense. And if you look globally at postal services that have been more successful in modernizing, they're doing things really different.
Who needs
as
it, Jordan?
compared.
Like, what's the political constituency for this?
I think that there's a huge, like, do you order shit to your house? Anyone who orders shit to their house,
yeah, but it comes.
It comes. It doesn't come by Canada Post. Canada Post doesn't deliver it.
Small businesses need it. Small people who live in rural and remote areas really need it. This is still a very important service for a lot of people. And the point is it could be a better service. But they would have to look at things like diversifying revenue streams. They would have to have a different approach.
If I live in rural, I'm going to fight with you. I'm just going to keep fighting with you.
If I live in,
if I live in rural Canada, why do I need Canada Post more than if I live in downtown? Why do I need, like, what am I getting? Am I getting long letters from Aunt Gladys? Like, what am I fucking getting as a resident that I'm not getting in Toronto? Why do I, like, what mail other than flyers do you get?
Because those delivery services may not necessarily service those
it's
not
going to be like
areas,
what Kory is describing. What Kory is describing is slicing and dicing the mail and parcel industry in Canada, so that only the shittiest, least profitable portions of it would be left for Canada Post.
Well, if it's a public service, isn't that what you're arguing too?
No, my argument is if it's a public service,
but it's not being used.
In it.
It's not being
used because it's being badly managed and it's not working properly.
You would have the government running the fucking grocery store, though.
I would have the government running a postal service.
All right, so I started with cutting Jordan off. Jordan, finish your point. Then I want to hear from Scott.
Look, my point is that this is something that is I think we can all reasonably agree that if we were to delete Canada Post tomorrow and it was no longer possible to send a piece of mail to your buddy who lives, I don't know, in northern BC, because that is not a profitable route for a private company, then that's like a fucking problem for our country, right? We have something where there is infrastructure all across the country, something that could be good for a growing segment of business, which is parcel delivery, if it were invested in and built up. But instead, what we have right now is the government hollowing out that service, making it shittier so that then fewer people will use it, and more private companies, by the way, most of which are US based, are going to come in and take that slice of business while we're in the middle of a trade war. And people who rely on this, it's not just personal, it's also small businesses, and they're going to be now just subject to having these private options with no public option where you could cost control things a little bit more for them. There's a lot of reasons why it would make sense to invest rather than gut the postal service, but here we are because we're running it like a business. So I don't think it's a good move. I think it's bad for our country. And I think that there will be some political cost on this. Now, mind you, it's not 2015, so it is different, right? But I think that this is definitely something that they're going to feel a little bit of pain for in some quarters.
So are we going to get Belleville Reid here, or or Eglinton and Avenue Road Reid here?
You don't get Eglinton and Avenue Road Reid ever.
He says sipping his Starbucks.
That's right. It's just, excuse me, I think that's the Summerhill delivery guy.
What's on sale at Pusateri's? I'm going to stop by on the way back from the airport.
I'll firmly come down on all sides of this argument. So two pieces of context that I think, at least to me, are interesting. One, I'm reading the Jim Coots Diaries by Ron Graham, which I mentioned last week, which I'll plug once more, right? And among the things that struck me, I noticed the other night when I was reading, in 74, 75, and 78, there were postal strikes. And in particular, 78 blows up in his diaries because, to your fundamental question, David, is it a political crisis? Well, it sure as shit was in 1978, which I know 2025 is not 1978, but I was really graphically reminded of it, especially when coupled with this factoid. I, either for CTV or radio or whatever have you, I'm doing an interview just about every day, right? Like I got to do commentary just about every day. When did this notice happen? Like last Thursday or something like this? They said that they were maybe going to go on strike. It's the first time I've been asked to talk about this. Like on Saturday, I was asked to talk about Carney in the UK and whether or not he's doing too much foreign travel. On Sunday, I was asked to talk about the parliamentary budget officer. On Friday, Kory and I taped question period. It was not one of the two topics that came up. I've been asked to talk about Andisre a couple of times, right? Like, so I guess the honest answer to your question, setting aside any perspective I might have, is it must not be a burning question, because I don't see the Prime Minister getting pressed on it when he's talking in Avails in London. I don't see media producers coming to me and saying, listen, dude, you've got to cancel whatever you're doing and be on air at 2:00 because this Canada Post thing is fucking ripping through the newsroom. Like it's not. Now, Belleville, Hastings County, Prince Edward County, Scott Reid laments that. Like I go like, hey man, like I think I'm not nearly as cavalier as Kory in a couple of ways. One, I lament the passing of something that is a unifying national public service and institution.
Everybody used to hate it equally. Yes.
Yes. And two, I actually don't think it's quite as cut and dried as he says. I think if you look at when those many parcels arrive, a lot of them are actually arriving via Canada Post as the last mile. There's the end. Eglinton and Avenue. A lot of mine are. And I get a slip saying, you weren't home, asshole. So now because Trump is slapping duty on your package, you got to come to the Canada Post Office and pay for it. That's happening 3 times a week. So I do think there's a bigger effect than people might think. I don't think it's possible to recarve this institution without changing not just the things that Jordan was talking about, but the things that would also make Jordan uncomfortable, which is I just don't think that you can have the kind of work service guarantees and labor force guarantees to the postal workers that you've had in the past and that they are continuing to demand in order to reshape the organization that way and continue to be an aspect of that service delivery patchwork that's occurring. You can't pay people in quite the same way. You're going to have to make some of those changes. And by the way, I may lament the passing of some of those protections. But I just think that's the reality. And I think the unions are behaving this way because I think they see this as a last stand. I think they know that that the gig is up, and I kind of feel like they have to butch and Sundance this thing, or at least in their minds they have to butch and Sundance this thing, because it really might be the end of days. So I think we're going to lament this more than we think. I think we're going to find that there are bigger gaps in the system than we imagine with Canada Post. And if Canada Post isn't there, I think we're going to.
I also missed the Woolworths lunch counter.
No, but you know what? I can get lunch a lot more easily elsewhere. I think you guys are overestimating how much all of these needs are filled by the likes of FedEx.
Yeah, except it's not just FedEx. It's Perlator, it's UPS, it's whatever Amazon calls its own integrated parcel delivery system.
Half of which is delivered by Canada Post.
Seriously, yeah, not
we're all going to have our own personal
and with
drones.
poorly paid gig economy workers.
Okay, but fuck off already. Like this is standing on the beach and yelling at the tide not to come in. Like this is the pulp.
Why are you yelling at the tide and praising it for sweeping over us?
I'm not praising it.
That's not what it is, Kory. This is also lamenting that there's a lost opportunity to do something better, more creative, and smarter with this as a public service.
It's an anti-modernity argument. Like this is like
we don't all have to think smaller.
Yeah, well, it's not smaller.
We're getting into ugly territory.
I know. Scott and I are getting nervous here about where this is going.
Turn my camera off.
No. Started off with Scott having his gear out at the video, right?
Yeah, well, it's that kind of show.
When is it ever not that kind of show?
He's the one who's always talking about.
So let's class it up. Let's class it up just a little bit. Mr. Pinsent, can you assemble the accursed for the Hey Yous?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Kory has to go before me today.
Yeah.
Because I have an A door, B door, and it will be affected by Kory's choice.
All right, Kory, you go.
Well, I'm going to throw into Mark Carney and the Carney government. You need to have a principal secretary. Like enough of this shit of the disorganized office. I read some Hill Times story this morning about basically that Pitfield's locked himself in an office in the PMO and won't leave. But he is also not the principal secretary. You had Lametti in there. Now he's gone. I guess assuming that Pitfield wouldn't let him sit at his desk. I don't know what's going on. Is I guess what I'm going to say. But what I'm going to say to the Carney government is principal secretary is actually a key fucking role in terms of managing some of the relationships with other governments, of creating a political narrative. And I don't see how you can have that role not filled. And if like the person who's squatting in the position with this, red swing line stapler, trying to fend off anyone who approaches the job that he's squatting in, then I don't, that's clearly not your guy. You got to find who is your guy or your gal. And you got to put them in place, and you got to let them do that role. Because if nobody's doing that role, you're going to suffer, I think, greatly. Because that role exists in every government I've ever seen, and it exists for a reason. And if it's not being filled, you got to fill it. And if you don't like the guy who's the temp in that role, you got to find the permanent person. But it's I think it's very important.
Question. All right, Jordan.
Yeah, particularly important when everything is flowing through one set of hands in a government. Okay, so I have a blessing going out. So this weekend, Heather McPherson launched her NDP leadership bid in Edmonton. She had Notley there. By all accounts, pretty good crowd. And I'm giving her a blessing because I think she said some of the quiet bits out loud that are important for a lot of New Democrats to hear. So she talked about the way that within the party, purity testing on more leftist than thou politics is driving people away from the NDP. She talked about the need to work with provinces that have been able to win across the country. And in my view, most importantly, she talked about the absolute importance of New Democrats regaining the argument and winning the frame and winning the argument around jobs, and that has to be crystal clear in every part of the country if the party has any path to rebuilding and ultimately to victory, which is a project that I'm very invested in. So I think Heather is smart. I think she's very hardworking. I think her entrance in the race is a real credit to the party. And so my blessing goes out to her for being honest in her launch remarks.
There you go, Heather McPherson. Welcome to the big show.
She had a lot of supporters there, eh? Just on that, I thought I saw Notley in the background. Is that?
Oh yeah, Notley was there. Yeah, Notley was there.
It's a pretty strong symbol relative to Lewis. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Scott, door A or door B?
I'm going door A. Kory left it open for me. I just want to say, though, on McPherson really quickly, one thing I liked, if you listen to her messaging, she was making an overt effort to capture a little working class kind of dirt on the boots there. Talking about being a truck driver's daughter, which I'm pretty sure is my second favorite Loretta Lynn album. So I liked all that. The reason I had to wait for Kory, because I wanted to know whether or not he was going to pick up on this Project Ontario thing that's, generated a tiny, and I would say kind of hold your hand over your mouth, chuckle bit of news in the last couple of days. So this group, they met, they had a meeting in Toronto, and they say they're a force for trying to change the Progressive Conservative Party in Ontario and alter the government, and they go to all these great lengths, and Jamil Javani is up front in the face man of it, but then they insist, well, we don't have anything, we're not trying to replace Doug Ford or undermine him, and so on and so forth. And I just want to say, and I'm glad I'd like to say this instead of Kory, so because it's about Kory in some ways, right? Doug Ford and Kory have built a political machine that I want to see break down. It is an impressive political machine. It has won 3 consecutive majority governments. It has increased its share of popular vote in each of those elections. The premier is somewhere between 40 and 50% after 8 years in government. It is just a success. Now, in some part, the Project Ontario's criticism is exactly that they think that it is impure, that it does not pursue genuine conservative policies, agree to which they want. Okay, fine, whatever. Here's my beef. First, don't be disingenuous. Don't tell us that you're gathering together to improve the party, not to take on Doug Ford and, by extension, Kory and the powers that be and those that have earned the place of influence and advisory roles. Because you are. And if Jamil Javani is going to be your front man, you fucking are. He worked for Ford. He got fired by Ford. He sued Ford. He carries an axe the size of Thor's, and he's brandishing it for Ford. So don't bullshit. Bullshitters. The second thing is the hubris of these guys and the way they position themselves. One of their spokespersons was quoted as saying, listen, we're not trying to unseat Doug Ford. We want to be us. He should be inspired by us. We want to be a source of ideas and a source of inspiration. You know what? Go to the doctor and get a dose of get the fuck over yourself. You know how you become a source of ideas and influence with a premier? You work and you work and you work and you earn your spot as someone who is indispensable and whose influence and ideas and advice the premier requires, the leader requires. You guys haven't done any of that. I don't see any of that happening. Take a job in the government, run a riding association, take up a position. Having a meeting with Jamal Javani on the margins of political truth and reality and just saying, we think the government should pursue a suite of policies that would help to lower its vote share. Whatever, fill your boots. I'm a liberal. I don't care. But it is amateur hour. And they all look and sound like amateurs.
It's dumb and it's ahistorical. I mean, the PC party when it has won in Ontario in modern history has been a centrist party, whether that is under Doug Ford or John Robarts or Bill Davis. That's how they win. That's what Ontario is. And Mike Harris is the only exception. There's lots of extenuating circumstances in the 90s that we could talk about around that. But these people are bringing forward a political recipe for losing. So anyway.
Well, and the truth is they're just mad that they're on the outside. That's what all of this drips with. Why aren't we the people in charge? Because you didn't work hard enough to take charge.
So I just want to send my hey you out to Bob Ray. See, I guess this kind of picks up off of Kory's point about Pitfield not leaving. But since David Lametti, who's a good guy, is the new ambassador to the UN, but I want to give a shout out to Bob Ray, who I think really performed that role exceptionally. Brought his own sense of the world and of values to it, and so pushed Canadian foreign policy as far as he could. From that role, I think we as a country should always be so lucky as to have somebody as bright and articulate and morally centered as Bob Ray representing us internationally. So thank you. Thank you for your service, and we'll see you on the trail. All right, all of you accursed, that's our show for this week. I want to thank the three of you for being here with me for a spellbinding, literally spellbinding conversation. Feel like Dr. Tongue's 3D house of... Anyway, and I want to thank all of our sponsors who make this free show possible for you, and all of you accursed who watch or listen. See ya next week. We'll have more.